Greetings, my name is Cosmic and I am the creator of the multimedia edutainment project Cortils Therapy Creatures. In this video, I will be going over the lore for Cortils the Stress Creature, while the speed draw of this creature's model pack plays in the background. Cortils, whose technical classification is Strictus crustacea draconis, is a scrunkly little creature with a long winding tail and large blue eyes, who is always walking the fine line of healthy and unhealthy levels of stress. These little dragon descendants are gardeners and problem solvers at heart, and use the health of their gardens to help them keep track of their own mental health. They are intelligent little beasts that are capable of creating and maintaining rudimentary tools to help them garden and overcome any problems they encounter. While they cannot speak, they can communicate by making large gestures with their long tails. When the Cortils become overwhelmed with stress or understimulated due to a lack of problems to solve, they revert to a more draconic form in which they are constantly spiraling in on themselves. To return to their more stable, small little fellow forms, they must face whatever caused them to revert to their draconic nature in the first place. The only way to beat stress is to face stressors head-on, and the Cortils take on challenges together as a group when a problem becomes too much for just one of them to handle. In therapeutic settings, Cortils can show people facing intense stressors how to approach their problems with healthy coping mechanisms and remind folks to make sure to take care of themselves by eating well, regularly exercising their muscles and brains, and to lean on others for support when it all feels like too much. Cortils' history: the self-slaying dragon. Many centuries ago, before humans were the predominant species, the Cortils were large, fluffy, wingless dragons and maintainers of the natural order. With their keen intellect, they kept the ecosystems they called home in check. When natural disaster struck, the Cortils were the ones to pick up the pieces to create new life after mass destruction. The Cortils observed the cycle of destruction and rebirth as the ultimate way to honor life, and they too would destroy things simply to rebuild them better than they were before. However, as other species across the globe became smaller and smaller, the Cortils began to find their massive size to become overwhelming. As other smaller creatures began to become overwhelmed by the Cortils' massive size, the Cortils too became overwhelmed by their ever-shrinking surroundings. No longer were they keepers of the natural cycle, but only destructionists who were too large to rebuild the tiny things that they destroyed. As such, the Cortils decided to become smaller too. The Cortils' life cycle begins with the death of a Cortils. As magical beings, when they die, their magical essence seeps into the environment around them as they decay. When a Cortils dies next to a tree, or is buried under a tree by their living brethren, the tree will absorb all of the decaying Cortils' magical essence. In 1 year's time, the tree will bear fruit in the shape of two conjoined spheres, with the top sphere being purple and sparkly, and the bottom sphere being fuzzy and gray. After ripening for 3 months as the magic essence within the fruit condenses, the fruit will drop and a baby Cortils will emerge from the fruit rinds. The older the host tree, the more fruit will develop and the more Cortils will be born. The time of year that a Cortils fruit ripens will determine the fur length of the Cortils, with winter ripening resulting in longer fur, summer ripening resulting in shorter fur, and spring and fall ripening resulting in medium-length fur. Meanwhile, the weather patterns during the ripening period determine how much of their fur is white in color and how much is gray. Bright sunny ripening results in a predominantly white fur, while rainy or snowy ripening results in predominantly gray fur. The size of the host tree influences the size that the Cortils will grow to as an adult. As the ancient dragon Cortils witnessed the world around them growing smaller and smaller, when it came time for a dead Cortils to bring life to the next generation, the living Cortils began burying their fallen brethren under smaller and younger trees, so that the next generation stood a better chance at fitting in with the shrinking world. As the Cortils species became smaller and smaller, their physical forms began to become unstable. The vast amount of magical energy from the previous generations of Cortils was being packed into smaller and fewer bodies of the new generations, and as they shrunk in size, the Cortils went from being maintainers of the environment to somewhat more helpless beings that could no longer dictate the chaos of nature. In an attempt to adapt to the changing world around them, the Cortils species put themselves under immense stress. Periods of extremely high or extremely low stress began to cause them to temporarily revert to their larger, more destructive forms that they were actively trying to evolve away from. As their physical forms changed, so too did their mental attitudes have to change. Instead of viewing themselves as maintainers of the death and rebirth cycle, the Cortils began to see themselves as creatures who had to do everything they could to make the best of their life cycle until they die and are reborn anew. Cortils biology, a bundle of scrunkle. Cortils today are short, earthy-toned, bipedal creatures that stand between 10 and 14 inches tall. They have large, bulging blue eyes that are constantly in search of the next problem to solve, game to play, or hurdle to overcome. Their large pointed ears allow them to precisely locate the sources of nearby sounds, while their antenna informs them of subtle movements in the air. They are fairly knowledgeable about weather predictors thanks to their antenna's high sensitivity. While at a glance the Cortils appear to not have mouths, they are in fact simply on the underside of their heads. Their stubby little bodies are covered in marbled gray fur that keeps them warm and protected in any weather. On each paw they have 2 pointed fingers and 1 pointed opposable thumb. These little fingers tend to be rather soft to the touch. On their rear, they have an incredibly long and flexible brown marble tail that is typically 3 times the length of their bodies, with a small purple orb on the tip of their tail. With as small as they are, Cortils often use their tails to help them reach high places by using them like a rope. They also use their tails to help them hold objects in place as they maneuver the object with their little paws. When traveling, the Cortils may use their tails to climb and swing around objects that are close to one another, or they may opt for letting their tails drag behind them while they waddle along the ground. The orb on the end of their tails is incredibly squishy, and by holding this orb in their hands and squishing it, Cortils can cause their entire body to relax thanks to the special hormone generated within this orb. They do go completely limp for a few seconds though, so they only ever squish their tail orbs when they feel safe enough to relax and let loose. Without the orb to help them regulate their bodies, Cortils would always have incredibly tense muscles. Chronic pain tends to develop from tense muscles, so when Cortils began to feel physical pain, they know it's time to step back and relax. Cortils are omnivores and try to keep their meat to plant ratio about 50-50. Some grow fruits or vegetables in their gardens to eat, though others enjoy the challenge of foraging for their plant intake. Most Cortils get their protein from catching and eating bugs, and a handful of Cortils may partake in catching and eating a small animal now and then. When hunting for a source of protein, Cortils tend to sneak up on their prey, then use the ends of their tails to bash or constrain their target until they are weak enough for the Cortils to pounce and deal the final blow. Thanks to their draconic lineage, they have very strong stomachs and can digest just about anything. However, eating non-food substances will make them sick. Cortils are rarely ever hunted because engaging in fighting almost always causes them to turn into their unstable draconic form, which will thrash about and destroy everything in their path. To kill a Cortils, they must either be completely unaware of a threat directly behind them, or they must be in their vulnerable, completely relaxed state after having their tail squished. They must be killed quickly with a direct hit that severs their brainstem. Attacking them anywhere else will keep them alive long enough to shift into their destructive form. Their tail organ will not work if they are in their unstable form, and may have the opposite effect if squished in this form, making them even more enraged. If a Cortils is killed unassuming, their meat will have a chewy texture and a sweet and savory taste. If a Cortils is killed when completely relaxed, their meat will have a soft and creamy texture and taste extremely bitter. This extreme shift in taste is a result of an excess of the relaxing hormones released by their tail organ being present when killed in their vulnerable state. Cortils psychology, keeping stress in check. To understand the mind of the Cortils, we must first understand what stress is. The American Psychological Association defines stress as the following: the physiological or psychological response to internal or external stressors. Stress involves changes affecting nearly every system of the body, influencing how people feel and behave. By causing these mind-body changes, stress contributes directly to psychological and physiological disorder and disease and affects mental and physical health, reducing quality of life. While this definition puts stress in a rather negative light, stress itself is not inherently a bad thing. Moderate levels of stress can, in fact, be good for you. When faced with manageable amounts of adversity, all creatures grow, change, adapt, and develop meaning from their lived experience. Stress is inevitable in all walks of life. What's important is how we decide to react to those stressors. Do we run away and hide from stress, or do we take on the challenge that stress presents? Cortils is a creature that is constantly walking the fine line of balance between healthy and unhealthy levels of stress. They perceive life as a variety of encounters with potential stressors and mindfully choose how to address each stressor they come across. In the Cortils' eyes, to live is to have a force to overcome. As such, Cortils love puzzles, games, and maintenance. They are tail talkers in the sense that their tail is the most expressional part of their body, but also that they use the motions of their tails to communicate with other creatures. When presented with healthy, manageable levels of stress, their tails maintain a swirling, flowing movement around their bodies. When presented with too little stress, their tails fall limp and they tend to trip over themselves. When presented with too much stress, their tails have a tendency to move rapidly and without logic, causing them to become entangled in their own tails. Cortils, like many creatures, have some difficulty constantly staying aware of just how much stress they are carrying within their bodies at any one time. To help them stay mindful about how much they are taking on, and to give themselves a problem to constantly be working on and thus a purpose, most Cortils collect and nurture plants. They will find a vessel of some sort to store dirt and nutrients for plants in, with a preference towards shells, and plant various bits of nature on the vessel. They keep their gardens small enough to carry, and usually set the garden atop their heads or on their backs. These self-made gardens are physical representations of a Cortil's stress levels. When the Cortil's stress levels are stable, their garden will be happy, healthy, and well-maintained. When they have too little stress, their gardens begin to perish. And when they are overwhelmed with stress, their gardens become overgrown and messy. Unhealthy levels of stress cause a physical reaction in the Cortils. As their stress becomes unstable, they begin to transform and become one with their extremely expressional tails. This transformation results in the Cortils returning to their unstable draconic forms. To return to their smaller, stable forms, the Cortils must first repair their garden, and then confront and overcome what brought on the unhealthy levels of stress. Cortils Society, fostering healthy outlooks. In the wild, Cortils build solitary nests within a half-mile radius of a stationary communal Cortils garden. These nests are often made by stitching the leaves of large plants together for shelter, or by digging out nooks under shrubs and tree stumps. Cortils hunt and eat alone, but they quite enjoy problem-solving or approaching large challenges together as a group, also known as a grapple. A grapple of Cortils will communicate ideas on how to solve a problem by making gestures or shapes with their long tails. A Cortils community can range anywhere from 3 to 20 members, and each member contributes to maintaining the grapple's garden. This larger garden serves as a place of community and relaxation, as well as a representation of the community's health. A well-maintained communal garden indicates that the Cortils are working well together and respecting one another's boundaries. An overgrown communal garden indicates that an unbalanced grapple, in which some Cortils hold more sway over the group decisions than others. And a dying communal garden indicates that relations between individual Cortils are falling apart. Some grapples will stay together for several generations, while others may only last a few months. Cortils can survive on their own without a grapple, but generally they prefer to be part of a group as it provides a community to lean on when a challenge is too great to overcome by themselves. When surrounded by other Cortils, they tend to become little terraformers and construct primitive structures for every Cortils within the grapple to use and enjoy. All Cortils are sensitive to the stress of other creatures and beings around them. Domesticated Cortils have a tendency to mimic the stress levels of the human they live with. How the human responds to stressors will influence how the Cortils respond to stressors as well. With Cortils being as empathetic as they are, some like to keep them around to help monitor their own mental health and to have as a helpful little companion. Cortils tend to enjoy assisting with everyday challenges like chores and playing games with humans who are willing to feed and shelter them. When Cortils die in the wild, their grapple will either bury them underneath a tree to create the next generation of Cortils, or if the population is high in that area, they will disassemble the body and separate the organs, bones, and muscles. They will then scatter the body parts around the community garden based on what nutrients are needed in various parts of the garden. In the view of the Cortils, this death ritual ensures that their fallen brethren will still have something to overcome in death, even if they don't grow into the next generation of Cortils. They believe the dead Cortil's soul and body will become one with the plants the grapple is growing. Their final challenge is to become a new form of life with a new purpose for existing. In domesticity, they are often buried underneath in gardens or trees as a human version of the Cortil's death ceremony. How Cortils assist in therapy. problem solving and relaxation. It is appropriate to bring a Cortils into an animal-assisted therapy session when a patient is having difficulty confronting and handling day-to-day life stressors. Cortils can also be helpful in situations where a patient is going through a major life change. The introduction of Cortils into therapy can be a chance to talk about the 4 types of stress responses. It is important to note that toys and games are vital to animal-assisted therapy sessions involving a Cortils, as they can demonstrate problem-solving techniques and various stress responses by giving them a puzzle or toy to interact with. Since Cortils love having something to overcome, presenting them with a toy opens up the opportunity for both therapist and patient to observe the behavior of the Cortils and to discuss how the patient is able to relate to the creature and what they can learn from them. Cortils can be observed using shift and persist, fight or flight, excite and delight, and tend and befriend stress responses depending on the individual Cortils' temperament and the kind of toy or puzzle they are presented with. Which stress response is utilized has a lot to do with the perspective and outlook on a situation. A fight or flight response perceives a stressor as a threat, as something that is actively trying to harm the patient that they do not have the tools to overcome, so they must either fight it, flee from it, or freeze in front of it. The shift and persist response, on the other hand, perceives the stressor as something that can be dealt with because the patient has the tools and support at their disposal to do so. Shift the stressor from a threat to a game or challenge to overcome, and persist through the difficulties by maintaining a positive outlook by finding meaning in the journey it takes to overcome the stressor. Excite and delight turns a stressor into fuel. Rather than the stressor being something to fuel fear, it can be used to fuel one's drive and determination to achieve some kind of positive outcome. Lastly, tend and befriend involves dealing with stress by helping others. Removing others' suffering can help relieve one's own suffering. Generally speaking, Cortils have a shift and persist or excite and delight style of stress response. The other 2 responses can also be observed, but on a less frequent basis. The most effective way for Cortils to be helpful in animal-assisted therapy is to give the Cortils and the patient a puzzle to overcome together. Cortils may inspire a change in outlook towards stress in a patient since they love working through problems, especially with other creatures. Cortils may also be helpful in teaching mindfulness and relaxation. Cortils love to be squished since it helps them release pent-up feelings from their muscles. Squishing a Cortils' tail and causing them to relax and go limp can be used as a moment to teach mindfulness. As the patient holds a limp Cortils in their hand, have them take note of the Cortils' soft fur, their relaxed muscles, their deep breathing, and their trust in the patient as they hold them in their vulnerable state. Have the patient take a moment to try to mirror this relaxed physical state in themselves to show how mindfully relaxing one's body can help relax the mind as well. For a more interactive exercise to help distract from stressors for a little bit, have the patient help a Cortils tend to their garden. Maybe even go outside and do some foraging and gardening in the surrounding area. Going out on a walk in nature may be beneficial in reducing stress levels enough for the patient to have the ability to reframe and rethink about their stressors. To teach help-seeking behaviors, have a patient and a Cortils play a board game or video game together. While they need a special controller made to fit in their little hands, Cortils love video games with lots of puzzles and the game mechanics. They have a preference for collaborative gameplay, but they also enjoy games that require a high level of strategy and learning. 2-player collaborative games can be an excellent tool to show a patient how to lean on and rely on others for support in times of stress, and an excellent bonding experience between human and creature. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the ecology for Cortils the Stress Creature. If you'd like to learn more about Cosmic Therapy creatures, you can find a PDF of the art book for the project in the description. You can also watch my video on the early design process for this project, or my videos on the lore behind Cortils' friends, Pinfree and Tolma. Thanks again!